behind the weakness lies the strength. Yeah, I always have a cigarette in my mouth when I feel inferior. The longer you smoke, the more comfortable you feel. That's why I love long cigarettes. It's the words of a man named Boyd of Panama. One word from Boyd, a protocol officer for foreign celebrities visiting Panama, needs to be carefully considered. The red wallet strengthens my vibe. It makes me feel very good. This can happen to an ordinary wife, too. No wonder people who cringe at things in the world or feel like they are insignificant are bound to find a breakthrough. In other words, you find a way to elevate yourself. In this case, long cigarette. Red wallet for me. It could be a dumb prescription. L.G. Maxwell was a poor girl born in a slum by the railway. She was severely ostracized by rich girls when she was young. I didn't have a dress to wear to the party, so I always had to stay alone on weekends. This gave her a terrible sense of inferiority. What happened to LG after that? She became the organizer of the best party in the world. This was how she overcame her inferiority complex. Most inferiority complex arouses anguish. A person who is obsessed with inferiority complex said, "I have no merit. There is something missing. Therefore, I suffer thinking that nothing can be done." Thus, you become an introvert who lives tightly trapped in a timid self. But at some point something appeals to the introvert. You experience a moment when your flaws are perceived as your strengths. We have a stronger side than others in some ways, and a weaker side than others in others. In order to drive out the sense of inferiority in your mind, you must expand your strengths further. Edison was deaf. It was his handicap, but one day suddenly he realized, "I'm happy." This mindset pushed him to the top of his life, because I can only hear what I think I want to hear. Sometimes one's fatal shortcomings are the key to success. This is what I have. I know for sure. There is. And I have the strength to overcome it. Success awaits you when confidence comes first. If there is a downside, don't try to hide it. Because you definitely have a better advantage than that. A person who is too introverted and has a fear of being behind others. A person who doesn't say anything at a meeting. A person who only sits in the corner, as if he were an uninvited guest. People who always stand behind their backs when they stand in line. People who don't want to look into the other person's eyes face to face tend to hunker down for fear of revealing their flaws, so they turn it up. They don't know that they're going to be doing well. On the contrary, there are cases where exaggerated gestures are made to hide their inferiority complex. Too much talk is actually abnormal. When a person is afraid of something, he becomes too talkative. Usually, in this case, you're going to say something that doesn't mean anything. Talkative. 108 Good Habits. My weaknesses. It's because I believe I'm confident by talking. He is a person who never bluffs at someone who talks carelessly and confuses the other person. Being chatty is born with an extroverted personality and a true extroverted personality. This includes people who are energetic, always cheerful, and have a flexible way of thinking. A person's superiority and inferiority cannot be determined by the degree of education or standard of living. Of course, not having an education may be a disadvantageous condition for success. However, education is by no means an essential condition for success. A man like Truman was from poor heayong, but he finally became president. He was, by no means, the so-called intelligence. Therefore, you should not think that your education dictates your fate. Often, we see people around us who, despite their rich environment or high academic background, become the losers of life. Everything depends on your willingness to challenge your life goals. People who show off their diplomas are never welcome wherever they go. For example, it's wonderful to wear a prestigious college badge, but if you attach it to your mind, you'll be your friend. Remember, there is no 110 good habits of successful people. Only the conditions we see in, we often sleep. It is committed not only to the foolishness of prejudice to evaluate a person's value, but also to others, a habit of not judging others recklessly. There's a saying that don't ignore people in old pods. That's because he may be the one who has the potential to ride Rolls-Royce one day. A kettle filled with water makes no sound. A shabby dressed old gentleman came to book a room at the front desk of a hotel. The hotel room manager glanced at the old gentleman's shabby clothes and led him to a cheap room in the corner. The old gentleman revealed his name with an exasperated expression. Then the room manager was forced to panic. The old gentleman was the owner of the hotel with a world-class chain. We find it unpleasant for everyone to be ignored by others. They laughed when they saw me sitting in front of the piano, but when I started playing, their eyes turned to surprise. 112 Good Habits of People in the Sky. This was used as a copy of a piano production company. After the commercial was released, they recorded sales several times higher than usual. A habit of not dealing with the desire to be recognized by others is connected with the desire to be recognized by others. When these desires are not realized, people have a great scar of inferiority. The above advertisement is a clever use of the psychology of people who want to be recognized by others. If you want to look good to others, praise your opponent as often as possible. Most people are hungry for praise. If you want to be praised by others, you must first know how to acknowledge others. Remember that it is the safest way to overcome your inferiority complex and take the shortcut to success. After all, nothing is as easy as winning a person's favor. You just have to praise them first and entertain them. Be inferior to oneself or prejudiced against others. Keep in mind that Ram can never please. Realizing your talent and not hiding it is the best way to overcome your inferiority complex and entertain others. You can have a lot of other people's feelings without ever being put on the back burner of conversation. You're afraid to meet people. You might feel it. It's because of the concern that the other person won't enjoy the conversation with him. Then why don't you try a trick to entertain the other person first? One thing to be especially careful about at times like this is that you're happy to meet with the other person, but you shouldn't make leaving your side happy either. It makes the other person happy. It should be noted that no disrespect should be committed. First greetings are important, but goodbyes are even more important. After exchanging meaningful conversations at best, I said, "Now I'm done looking." How unpleasant and ridiculous would the other person be to say goodbye like this? If you met him for the first time, "How are you? How do you feel?" Avoid outdated greetings such as "the weather is nice," as much as possible. It's something anyone can say. You should also avoid saying hello too condescendingly. The attitude of overwhelming the other person with just one greeting can only bring unpleasantness. If it's you, the topic, or the person's ego that makes you interested in the other person. 114. Good habits of successful people. We need to find a word that elevates. For example, "I've been hearing rumors, but I've always been thinking about seeing you once." In this way, the other person should use an expression that can make you professionally aware of yourself. "I think I saw you once at the last meeting. Have you ever appeared on TV before?" I'm paying attention to you as much as possible with expressions such as "I'm paying attention to you." Must communicate his intentions and ensure that his attention is not taken away by anything but you. Whether it's social or business meetings, you have to constantly convey the feeling that you value meeting with the other person. Finally, a British proverb to console your inferiority complex. Even a man who is too talented can starve his wife and child. Stick to the grand principle of friendship. Criticism of a third party or excessive self-esteem as making the worst mistake while having a conversation to attract other people's attention. And you can have an attitude that doesn't seem to trust the other person. You should not be a gossip maker in any case. A person who likes to speak ill of others is not respected. In particular, gossip from those who did not attend the meeting should be avoided. Even if it's inevitable to say that, you should always think about it one more time and say it after you think about it. You have to brag about yourself properly. It may be a way of propagating you, but remember that if you go too far, you'll get tired of the other person. It is the worst attitude to have doubts about what the other person has said. Take the Chinese proverb once again. It's better to be deceived than not to trust people. 116. Good habits of successful people. If you're too suspicious, you'll act suspicious. And you'll say something as if you're going. As a result, he is reliable. I'll end up with something I can't do. Don't be as careful as you can when you put it into words that you are suspicious. Horses can flow out as easily as water, but they can never be picked up. Think twice before you blame the other person. If you want to get attention, you should pay attention to the other person first. If you want to get an invitation to eat from a close friend, don't insult the chef at the house. A good friend is a precious treasure in life. Don't forget that you can't meet a good friend if you can't make the other person feel good, even if you're good at talking. In order to maintain the right interpersonal relationship with each other, the following methods should be noted. Pizza is also a charm that can attract a lot of other people's favor to you. Thirsting your friendship with it. Make me hungry. Second, you shouldn't sell empty boxes. Thirsty for the other person. There is one way. It's always giving the other person more than you crave. Anyone who wants to receive without giving always disappoints people. Therefore, you should always fill up the gift box of likability. Try to be generous rather than kind to others. Third, try to keep pace with the other person. Your friendship is hungry. Another excellent way is to keep pace with the other person. Get their hobbies and feelings of interest right, and then fit yourself into it. Don't force the other person to keep pace with you. First, make yourself thirsty before you are recommended to drink water. If the other person becomes thirsty to be close to you, that person will be your best friend. Never be a follower of someone, but lead him to your side. Fourth, if you can't convince the other person, try to form a team with them. When you realize that you can't convince the other person, you shouldn't cooperate with him. 118 Good Habits of Successful People. The way not to lose touch. Don't forget to give yourself a pet first. Row ball. 120 Good Habits of Successful People. The case is an ancient story of Korea. Get rid of your memories. As soon as you see a person, you have a preconceived notion and believe firmly, and it is expressed as a fault. He looks strict, but he's from Chungcheong province. Aren't you talking a little slow while doing it? However, not all people from Chungcheong province are slow to speak. I'm also from Chungcheong-do, but people around me say I'm too fast. If you're from Chungcheong-do, you should be slow to talk. In addition, there are cases where people wearing glasses are treated with the stereotype that they look strict. Therefore, it is sometimes thought differently that a person wearing glasses cuts the price of an item, and a person without glasses cuts the price of an item. I think it's because it's strict that a person wearing glasses cuts the price. People without glasses think that if they cut the price, the item seems a little expensive. In addition, when a soldier or a person dressed as a police officer suddenly appears, I think, did I do something wrong? This is because, as a stereotype, police or military attire is associated with crime. Positive stereotypes are fine, but having negative ones can be a big problem. Most people say they're from the movement. Oh, you must have done a lot of demos. Wouldn't it be quite straightforward? If you look at injustice, you must be intolerant. I think. When I was working as a manager at a hotel, I sometimes drank with the union leader. It is true that I also have a fixed idea of the union leader, saying, well, you must be quite dissatisfied with management. When we talked over a drink, it wasn't like that at all. I was wary the first time or two, but after talking and drinking together several times, it was completely different from the stereotypes I normally thought of. One of the things that people are prone to mistake when they establish human relationships is prejudice that arises from stereotypes. It's a problem in seeing people normally and seeing them pitifully. Park is a person with a difficult personality to move around. When I say that, I think, you look really picky before I even talk to Park. Stereotypes and prejudices are not just a problem in personal relationships. It can be said that big events such as the slaughter of Jews in the past and the extermination of the nation in the Yugoslav Civil War were also caused by stereotypes and prejudices. It is more dangerous than anything else to treat people with stereotypes in human relationships. I'm a person who has stereotypes and sees them negatively. 120 to Good Habits of Successful People. It is surprising that when one person is harsh while sharing his or her anger, there are many cases where he or she feels favored in his or her thoughts. If you have a direct conversation and express it honestly, you will have a great effect of meeting someone who is completely different from the stereotype. It can be obtained from human relationships. Just because someone else treats the other person with a negative stereotype, I don't have to agree with it. The habit of treating the other person with my own characteristics, my own personality, and my own human relationships is the shortcut to establishing true human relationships. If you have prejudices or stereotypes when evaluating people, it is better to abandon those habits quickly. A person must experience it to know, but never judge it by appearance or rumors. The power of pure interest. You can't get the other person unconditionally with the present. Alfred Adler, the author, lives his life in hardships where he doesn't care about others. There is no choice but to live, and it is only a heavy burden to the other person. Because all human failures occur among such humans. If we want to gain friends, we must first be able to devote our time and efforts to the other person. Only real interest is what moves the other person and opens his or her heart. When German Emperor Wilhelm II was defeated in World War I, not only the German people but also his men hated him. In addition, the responsibility for the defeat was passed on to the emperor. In the midst of the chaos, Emperor Moon was anxious because of the pain of defeat and the insult of his subordinates' betrayal. There was even a fear that one day an ominous situation might hit him. At this time, the boy sent a letter of consolation to the emperor. No matter what other people think, I'll always be your majesty. You can't make it. A true friend is there are so many people in the world who have fallen into vain efforts to get the other person's attention. But they overlook the fact that human nature cares more about itself than the other. A telephone company in New York once researched which words were used the most during a call. It is said that the first person pronoun was I. That's how much a person's interest lies with himself, whether conscious or unconscious. If there is someone who thinks they are not, try answering the following questions. Whose face do you find first in a group photo? If I die tonight, how many people will come to my funeral? 120 for Good Habits of Successful. I will respect you as a person. You are the hope and the leader of all of us. Upon reading this letter, His Majesty was moved to call the boy to the palace. Then the boy came with his mother. They opened the door of their hearts wide and comforted the emperor. After that, the emperor forgot the heartlessness of the thin ice, reality, and regained his peace of mind. Finally, the emperor married the boy's mother. President Roosevelt of the United States was respected by many people for his pure love for humans. He visited the White House one day, after his term as president. Taft, who happened to be the sitting president, was not out. Roosevelt, who had been touring the White House for the first time in a while, had been working since he was in office, had been a cleaner, a cook. Even the maid used to call her name and kindly ask for Andrew 3. As soon as he met Ellis, the maid in charge of cooking in the kitchen, he asked with great pleasure, "Ellis, you're still baking cornbread, right?" "Yes, but I don't eat the presidential department right now. It's just for us to eat. It only grills little by little." Upon hearing this, Roosevelt said as if he was sorry, "Tsk foot, people. You don't know the taste of the bread yet, so I'll have to tell you how good the bread tastes when I'm eat." Then Roosevelt walked toward the Oval Office, hand-wringing the cornbread Ellis had put on his plate. "When I met the gardeners and workers on the way, they greeted each and every one with a friendly voice. The servants would be moved by reminiscing about what happened then." A man named Hoover said later, "There wouldn't have been such a happy day in those 2 years since the president changed. The joy was that you couldn't buy it with silver money." Roosevelt was a man who knew the simplest, most ordinary, and most important way to attract people's favor. In other words, by remembering and calling the other person's name, he personally showed that his or her interest is in none other than the other person on the other side. In 100 BC, the Roman poet Fabrilius Cyrus sang this: "We are always interested in ourselves." This means that when we meet someone, no matter what purpose you have, first of all, read the other person's mind faithfully. You should try to know and understand the person's interests, even if it is trivial. C.M. Raphael of Philadelphia succeeded in moving the minds of his usual enemies in that way. As a coal broker, Raphael has been trying to deliver coal to a large chain. But the leading executive of the chain was already using another client. For this reason, he has only been hovering around the chain for a decade or so. 128 Good Habits of Successful People. Raphael gave a lecture fee. Someone's earnest advice to someone doesn't make the impossible possible. As such, the advice was not to respond to the notice. Then a new way was to suggest that Raphael, who is dissatisfied with the chain, act as a lawyer who advocates the spread of the chain. Raphael, who nodded, "Is the nationwide spread of chain stores really bad for the country?" I decided to go to the national debate under the theme of. There were not a few things that were puzzling as he, who was sorry for the chain, had to express the justification for advocating and spreading the chain. When that happened, he went to the executive of the chain store, where he usually had a lot of emotions. The executive also met Raphael, who had been chasing him for 10 years because he was tired of coal deliveries, so he met him on the condition of a minute. Raphael, who entered the executive room, opened his mouth with a serious look on his face. "Sir, I'm not here for coal today. In fact, I'm defending a chain store. I'm here to tell you that I've learned the good things about chain stores. If you want to see the effect of a compliment, you can experiment at home." This is because there is no place like our family where praise is neglected, and there is no place that is so desperate. If you are a person who is stingy with compliments, the family atmosphere must be dark. Marriage is nothing short of diplomacy. Therefore, being honest is never an advantage. Compliments are also a kind of white lie. If you want to lead a satisfactory marriage, you should never criticize your wife's way of living or compare her to her own mother. On the contrary, you have to praise your wife's strengths and express your appreciation for the luck of marrying her. For example, even if the dish is wrong, don't bruise it, and today is a little different than usual. It's better to move on lightly to the extent that then my wife will realize herself and never serve a dish. She made a mistake again. To learn how to win a woman's heart, we need to listen to the famous marriage scammer who cheated 23 women and even stole their savings bank accounts. There was nothing hard to do. All I had to do was talk about her. In the early 1900s, a boy of about 10 was working at a factory in Naples. The boy's dream was to be a singer. But the school teacher heard his voice and criticized him like this: "Your voice is like the clatter of doors in the wind. Music doesn't suit you." Discouraged by this, the boy gave up studying music. But his mother did not spare warm words of encouragement. "You'll definitely be a great singer. Mom knows that. Your singing skills are improving day by day." The mother's praise and encouragement changed the boy's eyes. He became the world's best singer after devoting himself to vocal music day and night. His name was Caruso. One day Carnegie visited Henry Suvan's office in Rockefeller Center. But I couldn't tell which floor Henry Suvan's office was on. Carnegie, who was looking around, approached her when he found a female guide in a neat uniform. "Excuse me, could you tell me where Henry Sobin's office is?" Then she opened her mouth with a very sharp accent, both clerical and rhythmic. 130 Good Habits of Successful People. The habit of keeping an appointment. Mr. Riri Suvan, Room 1816, 18th floor. Carnegie heard the two and turned around suddenly as he headed towards the elevator and told her, "Your guidance is really cool now. Very clear and precise pronunciation is so artistic. I wouldn't even be able to imitate it." The moment she heard this, her face flushed. Why did she guide her in that way? And where did she get that education? When dealing with visitors, he explained in detail how he greeted them. She was overjoyed by Carnegie's unpretentious praise. Happiness spreads so quickly with just one warm compliment from someone. Talk only about the other person. The other person will listen for hours and hours and not get tired of it. It's the words of A, who frequently gives lectures. There are many cases where the lecture hall is a hotel, company, auditorium, or banquet hall. Lectures are also held at 10 a.m. or 5 p.m. However, there is always only one thing in common in any chairman. That is the beginning of the lecture. Not everyone can start on time consistently. This is the same phenomenon everywhere. The inside story is that people who will take the course do not gather on time, so they cannot start. Lectures are used as examples here, and this phenomenon is often seen at meetings and meetings. For example, let's take a peek at the company's meeting time. The meeting starts at 5 o'clock, he said, but the laid-back person didn't walk around until after 5:10 p.m. You can find it coming in. If you set it to 5 o'clock, it's like around 5 o'clock. It is interpreted as if there is a time difference, in the sense that it is not a door, or about 10 minutes, or around 5 o'clock. It's a real headache. The time setting of 5 o'clock tends to be too complacent. Then why don't we set it to start at 4:55? I think this 55 minute detailed time setting will have a psychological effect that strictly evokes time. Equally important is the end time. It is also important to accurately set the end time of meetings. This is because if anyone is chased by a deadline, he or she will use his or her concentration to do it quickly, whether it's work or study. I think this time limit, and effective can be applied in various forms. In many cases, meetings, which would take an hour as they were, are often extended for 30 minutes, sometimes more than an hour. I think a good conclusion was reached because we spent so much time discussing it. However, this is not the case. Without any significant development, the contents of the meeting are just spinning like a squirrel. This is also attributed to the fact that the deadline for the meeting has not been strictly set. In this state, I often fall into complacent thoughts of there is plenty of time. In addition to this, I have to come to a conclusion in this time, no matter how. There is a lack of seriousness and concentration. Therefore, 130 for good habits of successful people. It is recommended that the end time of the meeting be purified. For example, if there is a policy of completely ending by 5:55 p.m., participants will feel like, let's focus for just these 55 minutes. Rather than taking a long time, it will be more effective to draw serious conclusions to the discussion in a short time. A Confident Man's Chapter. Wealth. Turn it on. No one can be an expert in everything. No matter how smart a person is, there can be a thing or two that is worse than others, and even an ordinary person has one specialty. The question is how to maximize one's talent and link it to social success. If you know that, you may be able to be known faster, but you don't even know what kind of talent you have. A person may never have the opportunity to be recognized by others. It is never arrogant to let others know my talent. Of course, bragging about how talented you are is enough to antagonize others. Being too humble is rather unwise. We are living in a dense web of social relations. Others. Not being recognized by means being abandoned by society. That is our reality. In order not to be culled, people must be informed of the existence of F. And you should get recognition from them as well. Success is not achieved by trying hard alone. It begins with letting you know who you are and what you can do well. Wrap it up as a decent person. Emphasizing one's talent is nothing to be ashamed of or hurt others. You have to bring out the best you have and concentrate people's attention there. They may notice the advantages and not be able to find any minor flaws or anything like that you have. Think of this as not to deceive people, but to guide their gaze to your advantage. With these efforts, you will have the opportunity to demonstrate your talents and rise to the top of the field. It is often said that it takes less than 10 seconds to determine a person's first impression. If you didn't get the other person's favor in 10 seconds, you're more likely to fail in what you're going to do with him. If you have more talent than others. 136 Good Habits of Successful People. If you didn't do well, your talent was obscured by your shortcomings of being passive. You should learn how to turn your weaknesses into advantages. Edison had a weakness that he couldn't make ears well, but he used it as an advantage to imprint the image of an indomitable scientist in people's heads. We share the shortcomings that everyone wants to hide and the advantages that we need to reveal. In order to succeed, you need to know how to change even the disadvantages that you have to hide into great strengths. Here, turning a disadvantage into an advantage is far from concealing a disadvantage unconditionally. If you highlight your strengths, your weaknesses will be seen as small to ordinary and human weaknesses. Therefore, it can be said that the first step in integrating well with the world is to discover the advantages of being able to confidently present yourself. The most right thing you can do to yourself is the advantage you have to sell. Once you've found it, you should start by drawing people's attention to it. If you want to attract a person to your side, first show your strengths that the person may be likable to. If the other person wants your ability, let him know that you have the ability he wants. If the other person wants a human charm, and if you have that charm. 138 Good Habits of the People in the Air. If you are a person, show your inner self with confidence. That's what successfully highlights your strengths. However, no matter what he wants, he should be able to be active and confident enough to know that you have the best strengths in that field. The most important habit of a successful person is always to remember that he or she is always confident without hesitation in revealing his or her strengths.